Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Elijah Morar, founder of Bedouin Games. His first title, based on the story of Noah's flood, is doing incredibly well on Kickstarter. Elijah, welcome to the binge. How you doing?
Hello, my name is Elijah once again with Bedouin Games, and thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, it's great to have you. Where are you located, Elijah? I know you're 3 hours behind me. You're somewhere on the West Coast, or?
Yeah, we're located in Sacramento, California, by Sacramento, California.
Now, have you lived there your whole life, or?
I am new to the area. We've been here for about 2.5 years, so fairly new, but we're liking the sunshine so far. So,
like a Bedouin tribe, you're just kind of making your way across,
that's right.
across the desert, eh? So
That's right.
how long you been gaming for? Is this in kind of a lifelong passion for you, or?
So yeah, it all started in I was born in the 90s, so I'm fairly young, but it all started in the 90s with, believe it or not, Scotland Yard. I remember that was one of the very, very first games that I've played, and I was kind of trying to also play it by myself because a lot of my siblings were like, we'd rather play outside. Because I did grow up in India. So, in India, it's always the perfect weather. So everybody wants to play cricket or, ball or something like that. And I was like, hey, we want something, to flex our brain. So, yeah, Scotland Yard, the Game of Life, the 1990s version. So those are the two games that I specifically remember starting out. And I was like, wow, there's more to life than just chess or checkers,
Yeah.
Things can be more interesting, story-based and, colorful. So
I'm not going to let the India comment go. So you were you born in India, or you just like, you travel there, or how did you end up in India?
Yeah, my family actually moved there when I was 2. So we stayed there for a while, and it was very exotic and super cool. That's why I like the sun nowadays, and I like hot weather.
Wow. So
I think that's due to my upbringing.
Your parents' work brought you there, I guess? Was that kind of?
Yeah.
Was
Correct.
it military,
Yeah.
or what?
No. Part of the time they were going to college because over there colleges were
Okay.
cheaper, and then the other part they were just, I guess they were tired and they wanted a new country or some exotic experience for it. So
That's
yeah.
cool. Well, I'm sure some of our listeners will be happy to hear that. A good chunk of our listeners are actually based in India. So a shout out to all of our Indian listeners who are listening to this podcast. That's pretty cool to have that kind of connection.
Yeah.
So you're playing, kind of the classics in Scotland Yard, and then when did that start transitioning into kind of this more modern style of gaming in this industry specifically? And what was kind of that, I hate to use the word gateway because it's overused, but what was kind of the gateway game for you to kind of really grab you?
Yeah, so I'll go back a little bit too.
Sure.
Is After India, I've played a little bit more because in India they have their own subgroup of board games that I've never seen here in the U.S. They're kind of Indian based, so Indian style the games, but they're also pretty entertaining, and there's Indian money and all kinds of caveats to those games. But when I came back, back into the US, I remember distinctively in high school, there was this game called Strategio that I really enjoyed because it's a blend of, sort of like checks and, checkers like mechanic to it, but it's also colorful because there's a lot of images of soldiers and strategy based on that. So that was one of them. And then later on in college, I remember we used to, I'm in the healthcare industry originally. So I was a healthcare major, and we don't get a lot of sleep, we have lots of exams. So in college, I used to hang out with all the business majors, and they used to always sleep and play Monopoly because they're like, oh, that's a business game. So I remember beating them a few times in Monopoly, and I was like, wow, this is great. So we had really, really competitive games. Uno, I'm sure your listeners have heard of Uno.
Of course, Skippo and a bunch, yeah.
So with that, I think my personal gateway game was actually Settlers of Catan and a more modern version like Wingspan. So okay. Wingspan, when it very, very first came out, I was like, wow, this is cool. Because I've never been exposed to anything besides Settlers of Catan or any of the classic games like Risk. And so with Wingspan, I was like, wow, I need to kind of, I'm thirsty for more knowledge, for more games and mechanics and something cooler. So I think the part of it was Settlers of Catan, and the other part was Wingspan, and then getting into it more and more, and pretty much playing a new game every week. So,
yeah, that's interesting because Wingspan, I would say, that's fairly recent, right? Like that's got to be in the past 4 years, maybe.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, about 4 years. So between kind of when you started playing Catan, I'm in Canada, so I say Catan. I know some people say Catan, Catan, Catan,
yeah.
tomato, tomato. I know there's a heated debate actually out on the internet as to how to pronounce Settlers of Catan or Catan. And but jumping from Settlers of Catan to Wingspan without any kind of transition there, that's actually quite the leap. I haven't, it's not something you typically see. But the hunger, I guess,
Yeah.
is what grabs you. And I think that's the important part. And I think a lot of gamers, especially in this indie industry, that's where they really relate, right? Is that you get one game and there's something in that game that just grabs you, and then you want more, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, I want to try a different game, and then on a weekly basis and so forth. How are you playing on a weekly basis? Are you part of a gaming group, or were you going to learn to play games?
Yeah, we have a small group of friends actually, and they're meeting tonight. But we have a small group of friends that I know that play games,
Yeah,
and I distinctly remember the first few games and the first highlights. So Catan was one of them.
yeah.
Wingspan was the second, and then Terraforming Mars was even
Uh,
more complex. But I was like, wow,
that's a
he
beefy
was
game, yeah.
that guy was able to build such an engine, such economics within a game, and it's fun. So after that, where I'm like, hey, I want to try more and more. And on a weekly basis, we rarely play games 2 to 3 weeks in a row. It's interesting to learn them. It's interesting, different art styles, different mechanics. So
Mm.
it almost keeps us going. So it's awesome.
Yeah,
So
the more games you can play, I find it definitely informs you. I know when Settlers Catan was one of the first ones in the new genre that I started playing as well.
mm,
And then I went and kind of launched a game that I had created like 20 years before, and ended up doing it on Kickstarter. There was a lot of learning in that regard, but what I really loved about the process is I started joining meetups initially just to kind of get people to play this game I was going to launch on Kickstarter. And what I found was in these meetups is I started seeing all these games I'd never seen before, and different concepts and different themes and different kind of mechanics that I wasn't even familiar with. And the same thing, it just grabbed me and I started saying, okay, I gotta try as many games as possible. One of the cool things about meetups for people out there that if they join them, especially if they're public ones, usually when you go to these meetups, there's going to be, everyone's bringing their own games, right? So there's usually a selection of things to try, and it's usually different every week, which is cool. So if you're someone that likes to kind of like when you're wine tasting, right? If you want to kind of game
yeah.
tasting, the best way to do that sometimes is go to these meetups where everyone brings their own games, and you can kind of circle around the different tables and kind of find something that maybe you haven't tried before and you want to play.
Yeah, one of the people from our crew that we usually meet up regularly, actually, I call him a board game collectionist. Yeah,
Yeah.
he has much more games than what than what he's actually played. So some of them are brand new, never opened.
Yeah, I got a
So
buddy like that as well. Yeah, he actually collects. So there's some that he leaves in the
yeah,
shrink wrap because he sees them as collectible, right? And I think we're seeing a
yeah,
lot of this as well. And even Kickstarter is a way for people to collect games and get into different things that have this kind of almost exclusivity, right, or limited kind of editions, and that's some of the hook there as well. How did that kind of I know we're going to get into the game in a second, but the whole religious aspect of the flood, and how was when was the decision made to kind of tie religion into your board gaming experience, or how did that come about?
yeah. So originally, too, going back with Catan, we started making our own rules because we're like, hey, you know, building a road to this many times, you get the victory point, but it's more fun if you continue the game. So we like invented castles. We build a castle instead of a city, and further on and further on. And then we started playing more and more games. And by the time we start playing different themed games, because we play literally pretty much everything.
Yeah.
So one of it too, it was like it was a vampire game. I don't remember the name of it, but when you chase Dracula all over the map, and you're several vampire hunters, and I got to think of the name, but it got to me, and I was like, hey, how come there's not a lot of Christian board games out there at all? Because we're Christian, and our friends are Christian too, and we're like, that would be awesome if there was something Christian themed, that wasn't too Christian in terms of, hey, a specific denomination or a specific religion, but something so broad that it'll kind of convince even the casual gamer or an atheist or anybody to play, because it's just fun,
Yeah.
because there are games out there like Quacks that you brew a stew and you're sort of a witch, right?
Yeah.
If you really think about it, but nobody pays attention to the theme. Same here, where we tried to do a Bible theme, but anybody could literally enjoy the game. We have a lot of cool mechanics in there, so that's one of the reasons why I was like, hey, we got to do something Christian. We got to look into this. So we literally just opened the Bible, started with the beginning of the Bible, and then we stopped on the story of the flood, because I was like, wow, building an ark. I don't think anybody has done a game about the flood and building the ark before the flood.
Yeah.
So I wanted that building process to be the core center of the game, where you actually complete a physical 3D model, because I thought that, the appearance of the model on the whole board would be awesome. So that's how the idea started.
And then how long ago did you start kind of working through the mechanics of how that would come together? Like how that would, so you had the theme obviously, but then the mechanics, I mean, there's, I would say some hints of Catan in there in terms of how the board's up and so forth. But when did you kind of lay down the initial even design of the game itself?
Yeah, that was actually in 2018.
Okay.
So in 2018, the idea was born. Then the theme came along. Then the core mechanics, and then additional mechanics with the core, because we had to test out everything. And like many of the people who created different board games, we all started out with paper pieces. We used crayons, to signify different pieces. That's until we learned of, hey, there's print and play, and you can actually order meeples, and you can do custom stuff. And so I think with them, a huge thank you to Print and Play, because they're able to accommodate a lot of designers and a lot of crazy ideas, and hey, they come up with it. They have custom cutting and stuff like
They're
that.
great.
So it's pretty awesome. And in our game, we have a trihexagonal board with different tiles, and it's very complex to create a prototype like that. So we would hand cut the tiles
Oh boy.
until we figured out that there's a laser cutting machine that can do them, pretty much perfect for you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow. So 2018, and then when did you find that you were ready to go to Kickstarter with the game?
We had several initial attempts to launch where we were like, okay, we're ready, but I was never satisfied with completely with the art. So we always kept on improving and improving and improving. And we wanted to launch actually 2 months before we launched, but due to the war in Ukraine, a lot of our friends are Ukrainian and designers are Ukrainian, so they were just not available, because of the war. So we had to postpone our Kickstarter, and they're all gone from Ukraine. Some of their families still there, so keep them in their mind, keep them in your minds.
For sure.
But yeah, we had to postpone the launch, but then we did launch. So
wow, and it's interesting, and I think it's Jamie Stegmaier that said it in his book, that if you're not ready for your campaign, and you delay it, nothing bad will happen. Right.
Yeah.
Bad things happen when you launch before you're ready. That's when bad can happen and go real bad. So, I think that, I mean, obviously the Ukraine is a timing thing as well, but even before that, having the insight to say, what, the art's not quite right. We really want to make sure this is polished before it goes out, I think is the responsible way to approach it, quite frankly, right? You want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward, right? You don't want to just kind of rush it. So the flood, and I was looking at I'm going to show the page here in a second for people that are actually watching the podcast, or the listeners, if you want to go check out the Kickstarter page afterwards, check it out. But you got some really cool components in this game, right? Like the way you build the actual arc is pretty slick. And from what I can see on this, I think you're right. I think you guys took a good approach where there's obviously a religious theme to the game, but you've given it a good balance where it seems like it's approachable to anybody, right? It doesn't seem like it's kind of hitting you over the head with a big stick. It's taken a fairly well-known story that crosses many religions, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, you can even tie it into the story of Gilgamesh if you want to, right? So, you got the story that most people know, and you've kind of applied this kind of resource gathering approach, kind of a bit of a Catan vibe to it, but I'll let you kind of explain, how it kind of branches on its own. But I think it was just really cool when I saw it, and that's what kind of really caught my eye right away and made me want to reach out to you guys. Besides the fact that, and I want to say is for to start off, I mean, this game's already funded, right? So you guys have a week to go. You got the back end hockey stick, but in Canadian dollars, you're already at $250,000. It's 1,718 backers. Congratulations! I mean, well done.
Thank you so much
for your first campaign. That is incredible. So kudos to you guys on that. But I mean, you'll see the artwork. The artwork is quite stunning. I think I read somewhere that you had pulled in different teams or so forth. Can you talk a little bit about the people you pulled in to help you with like the artwork and kind of the
Yeah.
design of some of the components and so forth?
I want to go back real quick
Yeah.
to actually deciding to launch the Kickstarter. We had contacted previewers and we had scheduled this nice schedule for all of our email subscribers, and but nothing ever goes to schedule, especially with the shipping nowadays.
Oh yeah.
So our prototypes were stuck in Australia for about 4 months, and we paid for overnight shipping.
Oh my god.
So that's quite a huge, because first off, it's costly to do overnight shipping
Yeah.
across seas. Even though it's a board game overnight, it still costs a lot of money. But being stuck there, like, just messed up the timeline. So a huge thank you to Dice Tower. They're very
Mm.
accommodating. Nobody knew that COVID would slow down shipping so much. So, and I think still they're having logistics there in Australia and New Zealand, just piles of packages in the airports waiting to get delivered, and a lot of them are overnight.
Worldwide. I mean, it
So,
is brutal. I just had a quote.
yeah,
I know it's a little off topic, but I just had a quote last week because we were running out of inventory on one of our games in the States, and we have a bunch of inventory here in Canada. And I think it was like 2-3 years ago, about 2.5 years ago, to ship a skid of product from Canada down to like we deal with Fun Again, so the warehouse in the States, in Oregon, would have been like $350, and the
yeah,
quote came back at $1,000 before we're even getting into broker fees at
yeah,
the border and so forth. And we ran the math and we're like, you know what? Sorry, we're out of inventory in the States. And, when you do an next print run, we'll ship straight from factories to the States because it does not make sense now to ship these kind of one skids at a time. So it has been absolutely brutal,
yeah,
the shipping on this industry. And I just hope the industry can survive, more specifically the small indie producers, because I think there's a lot of magic, a lot of gold in some of these kind of one-offs. Producers
yeah.
like publishers like yourself, that you have a creation as a passion project. There's a lot of love that goes into it, and we need the independent publishers to survive, right? It is becoming tougher when you have these kind of costs that are just weighing the whole system down. But I
Yeah.
digress. All
And
right.
a separate thank you to all the backers on Kickstarter
Yeah.
for not only our project, but every project on Kickstarter, because literally you have a cool idea, it works, it's awesome. But sometimes, if you wouldn't have the backing, you wouldn't be able to publish it because
Yeah.
it takes so much, even for tooling, just something little, even the prototype. Like our prototype is more than $2,000 just on its own to produce it due to the miniatures. So, some of these costs, I just wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah.
So thank you to all the backers for backing us. And we back projects too. We love it because of the coins. Honestly, some of the projects, their coins are super cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in the flood, we do have coins. I think they're going to get renamed to like faith tokens to match the theme.
Oh, that's
But the
cool.
coins look super awesome. So we're super happy about it.
So let's get into the game. So I've got it on my screen here. The board looks super cool, much like it. And this is where and I hate to keep saying Catan, but I mean, the way the board set
Yeah.
up at least initially made me, because it helps you explain it to other people, right? So you have your outer red, edge that you kind of click together, almost like a puzzle, and then all your what do you call them? Triple hexes or something? What's
Just tiles, but they're trihexagons. So they're
trihexagons? Yeah.
hexagon with three sides.
Yeah, that then you kind of build into the inside of the board to create your board. But other than that, I mean, obviously then the departure goes far to the other way.
Yeah.
The artwork, and so take us through this game so people understand what this game is about.
Yeah, so The Flood, it's a resource gathering, resource management, and engine building game. We did want familiarity with the tiles because honestly, it's hard explaining in the rules of how to place your pieces if you have a modular board. So we did want a little bit of that familiarity because it is a Euro game. It is resource management. But basically, you would set your huts, camps, and then your trails and roads between them, and you connect, and that will be your network. But the primary mission of the network is to kind of feed the resources into the placement token of where you build the arc. So this whole thing is done as where you roll the dice, you collect the resources, and your whole sole point is to build the arc. Now, during our Kickstarter, we unlocked some pretty cool goals with animal miniatures. So our point is like, hey, Noah must have had animals helping him for sure, because I mean, so that it's a super awesome concept.
You got mammoths,
So
right?
yeah. So now we have even more. I think if you scroll down, there's like a rhino, a woolly rhino, and all kinds of other creatures.
Yeah.
But all of those creatures will have unique attributes to them. And I think we unlocked a co-op version of the game where everybody would be working on the arc together. So they would be using those attributes in combination to complete the arc. So I think that was a super interesting twist where, you do have a hero token. It can do several different skills based on which one you choose. So I think players, it will kind of involve you more into the story. You'll dive deeper into the story with it, and it'll be more grasping.
Who came up with the I'm just hanging on the Meeple here right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's super cool. Who designed this? So you've and I'll describe for people that aren't seeing what I'm seeing here, but try to use descriptive words. Is you've got meeples are basically 2-dimensional, right? It's like a thick 2-dimensional image, and you've got 4 pieces that kind of cut and insert together to make the arc, which looks super cool. I mean, the plastic minis are even cooler. But who came up with this design? Because it's quite clever the way you guys put this together.
Yeah, so it's me.
Okay.
So I'm the one to blame. So, and there's criticism from both sides. So people that are not religious love it. People that are very religious say, "Hey, that doesn't look like an actual arc would look like." But to all those people, I would say like, "Hey, nobody really knows what the arc looks like, and this is a game. It's meant to be more whimsical because if you make it like serious and the actual dimensions, it wouldn't fit on the map. It'll be very small and very rectangular."
Yeah.
So for those people, we actually have an STL, so a digital STL that'll be included in our deluxe and all-in versions where you could actually 3D print your own. That actually is the right
That's cool.
proportions. And you can try to fit on the board, no guarantees. But I'm going to see some posts on social media once the game comes out of those fitted on the board, and everybody's going to have a blast. But yeah. So most of the design I did. We have an excellent team on our team, like Ben. Some of his previous jobs were working on Skyrim, so we're very blessed in a sense that all these artists agreed to work with us because we are a new company. And then especially with the Christian concept, everybody was like, "Oh, I don't know, it's not been done," or "Hey, this theme is too edgy," So, but the good news is, like I said, all of our staff are from different walks of life. So it's literally they're doing an amazing job, and is literally all them. Yeah, so thank you to all artists.
It seems strange to me that it's almost like a double standard, right? So if I look at the board game industry, there are numerous games that get into the mystical approach of other cultures, right? I mean, Buru is a perfect example based on Indonesian, and you've got the different things you're doing offerings to the god. I backed the game. I thought it was great. Doesn't mean that I practice, Indonesian religion. I just found the game really compelling, right? The mechanics, the way thinking, I thought it was really cool. So I backed it. And it almost seems when you get into like Christian Bible stories, it's all of a sudden like people are like, whoa,
yeah.
What's with the, putting your religion into a board game? It's like, guys, I mean, as you're saying, like if you want to be really technical, Wiccans, right? Get into witches and so forth. You got spells, you got magic.
Yeah.
You get people that I've seen, there's games that are based on the Mayans, right? And offerings to the gods. Yeah. I mean, there is different types of religions through the entire board game industry, right? So I think picking a story like this, clearly there's a market for it. You guys have done your job very well to hit a $1 million in funding or $250,000 in funding, and still with a week to go. I mean, that's proof right there that you've picked the right concept. I like how you've kind of incorporated the fantastical beasts in there, right? Because again, who knows, prior to the flood, what kind of creatures there may have been roaming the earth, right? So I think it's cool the way you approached it. I had one more question on the resource tokens because I thought that was really cool when I saw how those are distributed, right? So you got 4 wedges that form a pie, and then you got a marker on top it, right? So there's limited resources when you go to certain hexes. That's basically what that does, right?
Correct. Yeah. So there's 2 sets of rules, one for an easy game, one for a hard game. So for the hard game, they're limited. For the easier game, they're just set aside, and you have a special dice that you roll to get them. Because one of the reasons is during our TTS, we had an older version loaded to test it out of a hard mode, and everybody's like, wow, this is so hard. We cannot get, nobody's getting resources. But there's also an easy version where you do get a lot of resources, but it's kind of like inflation. You get a lot of resources, but you don't have a lot of time because everybody's rushing you through your turns. So you gotta, make critical decisions. But yeah, and going back to the religious theme, even something like our favorite game, Root. So Root is our all-time favorite game. But the lizard cult, you sacrifice animals.
Yeah.
But nobody really thinks about it. It is fun. Nobody thinks about it. But with a religious game, even if you mention a religious theme, that already becomes edgy.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but it is what it is. So.
Well, certainly, I think that either way you cut it, there's still a market for it, right? And I think being able to service that market in the way you have is pretty admirable.
Thank you.
What's next after? Like, do you have like, is there going to be another game that's going to have a religious theme, or how have you guys kind of mapped out your path as a company?
Yeah, so we want to make religious games. We want to make more of them. A little sneak peek: our next game will be a card management game, and but right now we're solely focused on the Flood to make sure we complete it because there's a lot of pressure. We are a new company. Yeah. So with a new company, people are like, oh no, they haven't made a board game before. But we have a lot of advisors from people that were super successful on Kickstarter, and a huge thank you to them. Like Andrew Lowen, I'm sure people have heard of him, and many others. So yeah, we're not in this alone. We're getting a lot of advice. Without it, it would be impossible. And even Jamie's blog posts, they're a treasure trove of information in there. So literally any question you want, you can just go on there and read through them and even ask him,
Yeah. So, he's very accessible. He's
super
so
cool.
kind with his time that he's given back to the industry. I know I plug him all the time on the podcast, but if there's any designers or developers out there that are looking to get in this industry and want to know where to start, go to stonemeyergames.com. There is an encyclopedia of how to bring a game to market and how to create gaming, in this industry. Right there for free, right? Just open it up and read it, right? So he's been fantastic for the industry. How do people follow your journey? Do you have like social channels that you've built up for kind of, some of your fans to kind of, follow along and provide input and so forth? Or
we have a Facebook group. It is closed, but you can still join it. It's closed to just weed out spam. Sure. But we have a Facebook group. We have our website at thefloodboardgame.com. You can always subscribe to our newsletter. Beyond that, Instagram, just regular social media channels, and BGG. But don't look at the comment section there. There's a lot of, we have to pick and choose our battles, and a lot of people don't like the theme, and the vocal minority don't like the theme, and so once again, just do your best and
you will always have trolls. Always have trolls. We had a game that was based on squirrels. And sorry, not the hippo game that we had, Hamsters versus Hippos. This is our last Kickstarter campaign. And we had sent out copies to probably 75 reviewers. It was a lot. But we knew exactly who we sent our games to. And there was some troll on BGG that never received the game, just for kicks, went and did like a scathing review, and they had never even seen the game because there's only 75 people in the world that even had the game before we launched. So you just got to kind of shrug off the trolls, right? They're there. Their entertainment is making people's life miserable. Take the higher road and say, you know what? I'm going to focus on the positive. What's great about this industry is 99.9% of the people are positive and are in your camp and are rooting for you. So it is an amazing industry part of it. I'm so happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's super cool. And everybody has been really, really helpful. We have volunteers to even translate the game. It's incredible. People we don't even know that are like, hey, we would love to translate it for you. So, the people in this industry are amazing. Yeah. So, yeah.
Elijah, I've put links in the show notes for this episode. So if people want to get quickly to your Kickstarter campaign, they'd follow the links in the show notes. They'll go right there. Or they can find it very easily on Kickstarter. You just type in The Flood, and you'll find the game there. I encourage everybody to check it out, at the very least, to see just the very cool design elements you have in here. You guys have done an amazing job, and I've really put a lot of work into this, and congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you to all of our backers.
All the best. You take care. Cheers.
Thank you.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.